So we'll kind of draw my talking bit to an end. But does anyone want to just raise anything or ask anything at this stage? Um, I will qualify what I've said with um, I've tried to fit things together and without being too forensic, which gets really dull and boring. You'll notice, particularly as we go on, there are some dates which are you have to give ranges for. It's around this time, and very often it's not that we find a document that says this is the date. It's trying to fit the pieces together. That if we know that somebody has died by a certain year, then it can't be then. And if we know they were doing something else before, so we have to fit them in here. And that's how I've tried to kind of fit the pieces together. So it's not perfect, but as much as anything, I want to kind of give you a sense of something along these lines must have happened. And the evidence we have, while it may not be conclusive, is the best evidence we have. And we know something has happened there, and so we've tried to fit the pieces together in that way. So if anyone wants if anyone has a specific question, I can try and tell you exactly what my sources are if you're really interested. If I can remember them off the top of my head. But do you want to ask anything?
Just one specific question, which is you were talking about John's Gospel and the elders sort of gathering together under Andrew's leadership and praying about whether to commission that new gospel. Where is the account? What's the source for the account?
Okay, I have I've covered that in. I've got something online that covers that. So but I can't remember. I've got several bits like when were the Gospels written. I've got a video called When Were the Gospels Written, and I cover and I show you the textual evidence, the account as it's written. There are a couple of accounts that make reference to this period, and of John's writing of the Gospel. What I haven't confused you with here is there are two characters called John. There's the Apostle John, and there is someone called John the Elder, who the early church refers to as being one of the 72. And there is some argument because the style of the Greek in John's Gospel and the Book of Revelation are slightly different. And some people say, well, it's because the one that was written with the commission of the eldership, with the apostles, has kind of had people to work with him and pull it all together. And whereas on Patmos he's just on his own, and so there's all of those kinds of things. But it's possible that one's written by one and one's written by the other. There's nothing to say that's not the case from the Bible, but I haven't confused it. So it's the references talk about how they come together and they pray, and they decide that John will write it and they will kind of endorse it. And Andrew is the kind of seems to be the one in charge at that point. I've put that quote up. So I didn't.
I can look that up then on your YouTube.
You can look it up on my channel. Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the thing about Revelation is a separate sort of question, isn't it? But it's very interesting what you were saying about John's Gospel.
Yeah, and it's possible. I'm totally aware. I'm presenting that as an idea. It's quite possible that it's written after the destruction of the temple. As time has gone on, I've bought more into the comments from John Robinson of he's really scathing of the idea that it wouldn't get mentioned by any of the New Testament books if it hadn't already happened, because it's so fundamental to the thinking of the next generation. That he says you really have to explain why it doesn't tell us, why it never says, as you know, there's no temple anymore, so that proves that we are doing the right thing. So when you take that on board, you have to try and squeeze things in to the time period, and this seems like a good fit. So
yeah, well, particularly since Jesus prophesied that, effectively prophesied that, you'd think they'd add it in and say, so there, it's happened.
It's happened, yeah, and Jesus refers to it as the end of the age as well. In that, that it is the end of an age. It's the end of the age of the temple. We're now in a new age.
Christian.
Yeah.
Oh, am I speaking?
You can. I can hear you, Sheila. Yeah.
Yes. It's just a question about the notes, because when you came to Simon the Zealot, there was nothing written.
No, I know. That's because I only added that one in earlier this afternoon.
Right. And then the last bit, where was it? After you mentioned Domitian.
Yeah.
Yes. Then there were no notes there until you got to the
No,
the
so
end.
I did most of the things yesterday, but I still hadn't quite finished. But we knew we had to get something out.
Oh, that's
And-
lovely. It's just I didn't know whether
No.
we had.
And you will also notice, therefore, the things I added in today are the ones where I suddenly realised that I hadn't quite got them as tidy as they ought to be. So that you'll notice more spelling mistakes on the ones I added this afternoon, and things like doubling up and so on. So they're not quite as, if I can be outrageous, say don't treat those as gospel truth. Sure.
No, I just thought if they were eventually going to be available online, you might.
I suspect at some point they will get into the notes. They'll get tidied up and put into the notes. It's one of those things where I keep thinking, if you wait till things are perfect, you never do them. So in one sense, it is a bit of a revolving thing, which I say, come back in a couple of years and it might be slightly different. It won't be radically different, but I will have qualified and tried to tie down things a bit more. But well spotted, Sheila.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, thank you. Anyway, it's been lovely.
It's good, and it flags it for everybody else as well. So.
Kristen,
Yeah.
if it's okay, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Something I find always of interest is, do we have what are the evidences? And that may be a big question and maybe not one that we can answer easily, but the evidence of the apostles, all the apostles being martyred, because that's something that I've heard watching, different videos, that actually we have only really quite conclusive evidence for the martyrdom only of a few apostles. So people are reasonably confident that Peter, for example, was martyred, but not automatically all the apostles. So what's your view on that?
So there are a couple that the evidence is very scant, and there are only a few in which it's really multiple sources, and then you've got a handful in the middle, like Matthew, who has a story that goes with it, fits some other things, but it is just one reference. And so some people don't believe it and others do. So you're kind of right, which is that there was the golden legend, which kind of everybody gets martyred, which is from about 1,000 years ago.
Powerful, isn't it? It's really
it's powerful that they all get martyred and they all whatever. As I say, someone called Philip probably gets martyred in where I put in 80 AD, because that seems to be referenced, but it's a bit confusing. They're not quite sure whether it's Philip the Evangelist or Philip the Apostle. But actually, you're absolutely right, which is why one of the reasons why I didn't say this is what happens to all of them. I think Thomas in Mylapore has a lot of there's a lot of evidence around, so he seems to be a good case. Bartholomew is a bit more confusing. Some say he's been martyred. Others say he dies back at home. So you're right, and I tried to. That's why I didn't try and give you a final list of this is exactly what happened. I tried to kind of reference what was of interest, and I'm even when we were going through it, I said, I'd say things like, I'm not so sure on that, but there is this reference, and we are aware that things were happening, so it's not impossible. It's just,
Which ones do we think there is a consensus that we know for sure? Well, for sure, you never know completely, but there is a consensus that they were martyred. So Peter, we know.
So Peter and Paul were pretty definite. I think Andrew is martyred. There is this difference as to whether it's early or whether it's late, but other than that, I think there are some kind of consistent things around that. I suspect that one of the Philips does get martyred, which is why we have that reference. And the interesting thing is, this is what I was saying, if it's Philip the Evangelist, one of the references say his daughters are buried in the same city. If it's Philip the Apostle, then it actually says that his wife escapes and goes on evangelizing, so she doesn't get martyred. And she leaves with Bartholomew at that point, but it's his sister, not his wife. His sister has travelled with him as an evangelist, and I like that touch, because actually that is part. We hear about Peter travels with his wife, and we know as well from, although totally different from the theme we're doing here, that one of the early Roman critics of the church references with disdain the fact that lots of their churches have had women apostles, women who brought the gospel to an area, people like Salome and so on. So we know that it's not, so although it didn't fit with kind of a few hundred years later, but we know in the early church there were quite significant women in the evangelism as well, you know. And so I, you know, that's why I'm saying you've got these two traditions. They both focus on Hierapolis, but one sounds like the evangelist, one sounds like the apostle. Are they the same person? Are they the two things? It's not likely that two people with the same name, they probably got confused. So probably someone gets martyred, but I couldn't say who.
Which one? Which Philip for sure? Okay.
Yeah. You know, so that's why I said I didn't try and put them all in. I wouldn't like to try and unravel it, but you're quite right, Manny.
I just find it very interesting.
Yeah.
Christian, how about John Mark?
So John Mark is apparently executed in 68 AD. It's the date's given a couple of places by. The thing that's confusing is that it seems that he passes over the being bishop of the church, and some people assume that happens when he dies. But then he seems to. There's also a reference to him it being in the 12th year of Nero or something or other, which would make it. I can't remember what the reference is off the top of my head, which would make it the 68. And 68 makes more sense because if Mark is the same person as John Mark, because it is possible there are two, if they are the same person, Paul is obviously writing reference to Mark in the later 60s, so he's not dead at that point, which is that little bit where I got a bit confused with my own slides and trying to remember the order. So neither scenario is a total disaster because, as I say, there's potentially two anyway. But I take it that they probably are the same person. He hands over the bishopship or the responsibility of the church because actually he's still doing travelling around and while he does go back to Alexandria and then eventually gets martyred, it's quite possible that those two are separate events. But
is he a definite a martyr, or is he a sort of?
I would say he is, the Alexandrian church becomes a very significant church in the Coptic Orthodox tradition. It becomes very large very quickly. It becomes a centre for quite a lot of people. Like Tertullian is from there, and they therefore it's unlikely that they've forgotten their own kind of, if you like, leadership stories.
Yeah, thanks, Christian.
Good. Any other questions? And I'm really not a super expert on these things. I've done it by kind of trying to piece the pieces together and going and doing research, trying to assess them, see do they fit or not. But as I say, I would guarantee that some of what I've taught tonight is not correct, but it's in line with probably where the more we pull stuff together, one of the great advantages we have today is actually how fast you can go and double check things. Huge numbers of the text that I refer to, I don't type them in, I copy and paste them because you can find the complete text in translation online. So, when you know that there's a quote by somebody, if you've read it somewhere, I can think to myself, I type in a few things and very quickly you can actually find the text, in translation that's been made available, whether it's Josephus, Epiphanes, or whoever, and you can cut and paste the bits and you can confirm what they're saying. So that's an incredible thing that we can do today, which we couldn't do 20 years ago. So I'm aware both of the strength of that and also the limitations of my expertise. Good. Anyone else like to say anything at this stage? Good. Well, I'll finish just by saying I really do hope you've got something worthwhile and enjoyable out of the time. I'm planning to do more kind of teaching evenings during this year. Roughly kind of half of the weeks of the year I've got something planned. It's probably not dissimilar to what I've done here. So this is quite nice that you've experienced it as the first off, which is that I'm aware that over the years I've done an awful lot of research for my own benefit. And actually it's nice to be able to share things. They may not be at the quality where you could write them in a book with references and notes and have it critically reviewed, but they are that's it's not inappropriate to try and share what you've discovered and how you put it together. But as long as you're honest about the fact that, you know, you can assess this, weigh it up, put it into its context. So I want to do more of these things, but and that's partly why I want to do them in this kind of basis of if deliver them, and if they're useful, please, if you can help with a gift, because actually I live by ministry, then that's a really good way forwards. And obviously if we do that, then I can keep on doing these. That sounds very manipulative to put it that way, but it's also the truth. You know, it takes time for me to pull the notes together, put PowerPoints together, so on and so forth. I'm at where I'm heading, and so probably in a week or so's time, because I'm disappearing. Well, I say we were supposed to go on holiday tomorrow, but with the winds the way they are, we'll probably go on Saturday instead. but we'd probably get a kind of a little questionnaire survey out. One of the things that's really helpful, if you find it useful, one obviously is if making a gift is great. Two is I'm thinking about trying to take the recordings we've done and make them just available as standalone, watch them in your own time and have some notes. But people like yourselves would be key for actually helping to get those out. And so, you know, and I'm trying to work out what's a good way of doing that. Do you make a small charge up front, whatever people do, or do you just gift them away and just do it by faith and say, you know, do whatever, come back? Some of the bits, what I might do is make more small short videos, like the intro one we did right at the beginning. You know, if anyone watched that one, that kind of 3 or 4 minute thing. And again, I'm really up for doing that, but it's helpful to know if they're going to get used. So if you think, you know, we could reduce an hour and a half by actually turning it into 25-minute videos. You know, 25-minute videos that are short and tight, would that be more preferable? All those kind of questions will be useful to kind of get feedback. And it's not just, oh, I think this would be good, but actually if you think they'd be usable, and if you can think of places which would be helpful and beneficial, then that makes sense. So in many ways, I thank you so much for being part of it, because you, as I regularly say, you become my guinea pigs to try these things out. Yeah, if you want to kind of participate more and keep the conversations going and encouraging other people if they think it's worth doing again, you know, that question mark's already in my head. Is it worth doing this another time, and when should I do it? That kind of question. So I would very much appreciate those sort of feedbacks. So.